Gibbes Museum of Art has had to make a lot of changes during COVID. Today, I talk one-on-one with the executive director of the museum, Angela Mack, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Angela Mack, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you for having me, Quintin. This is a treat.
Yes, ma'am. I really do appreciate it. Obviously, you are the executive director of the Gibbes Museum of Art right down the street here in downtown Charleston. And I know a lot of the nonprofit organizations around here have been really in a tight spot right now because of COVID. Who's Angela right now, Angela Mack, when you think of the Gibbes Museum of Art?
Who am I?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think, because of COVID, obviously the wearing more hats than normal, for sure, because not only do we have to, maintain the institution and continue to do the kind of programming that we've been able to do in the past, but I also have to be completely on top of all of the medical issues with regards to COVID, making sure that the institution is safe, the staff is safe, and all of our visitors are safe. So it's become now part of my daily habit to check all of the COVID sites and see where we are, and of course read the various news outlets to make decisions on a daily basis.
What data are you looking at right now when it comes to COVID?
So we've been very fortunate to have not only the general outlets with regards to newspapers and various websites, but we have a couple of medical professionals on our board, and they have been able to provide us with access to individuals who have helped us, for example, with our camp program in the summertime. When we launched a few weeks of camp this past summer, and we're trying to figure out all of the protocols to keep the children safe and our teachers safe, etc. At the end of the day, we ended up only doing about 4 weeks of camp with a much reduced size class before the numbers began to spike again, and we decided to stop at that point. But we're just constantly looking for advice from different people, whether it's the outlets that everybody uses or calling on individuals that can give us more detail.
Yes, ma'am. And what more detail do you have now?
I can't say that I have any more detail than anyone else. Clearly the numbers are concerning.
Yes.
And therefore, in our weekly staff meetings and our daily briefings, we make sure that the staff and everyone understands that we are more vigilant than ever. Mask wearing is absolutely mandatory in our building. Social distancing is mandatory. We are continuing to do the cleaning protocols that we started over the summer and doubling down on that as well. So it's really, understanding the numbers and trying to keep, ahead of it.
Yes, ma'am. Let me turn to the Gibbes Museum of Art. Obviously, I'm picking a part of your mission, but it says this: when we open ourselves to art, we open ourselves to the world, to beauty, craft, to different cultures, to pain and pleasure, expression and emotion. What else have you all opened yourselves up to when it comes to art?
Well, I think art is sort of this wonderful, great, or can be this wonderful, great equalizer, because anybody and everybody can be creative. And we try to meet people at all different levels, whether it's the beginner who just has an interest, whether it's the parent who wants to see their child express themselves in different ways, whether it's the scholar that, knows a great deal about art and wants to become more educated in a particular area. We try to meet people on every possible level. We also try to be as inclusive as we can. And this is something that we will continue to work on and strive for as we go forward. We just, as a matter of fact, did a review of our 10-year strategic plan, and in fact have made the decision, or in the process of creating what we're calling our IDEA committee on the board. It's Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Committee, which will be part of the landscape of committees that we have with our board members, where we have board members represented, but also invite people from the community to help educate us and help us understand what the community wants and needs.
Yes,
So,
ma'am. Oh, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
so, that's how we use art. I mean, that's what we think art is capable of doing across the board.
Yes, ma'am. Let me ask you this, Angela. What is your long-term equity goal as it relates to the issue in the place of systematic racism?
So from a content standpoint, and this is data we're actually collecting now in a much more focused way.
Sure.
From a content perspective, obviously our collection needs to be more diverse. And these are the objects that the museum actually owns. Being as old as we are as an institution, obviously there were works collected by white artists much more than what was done or able to do through a wider lens, a much more diverse lens. However, with exhibitions that we've done and examinations of our collection, we are making great progress in terms of equity within the collection itself. As far as exhibitions are concerned, that has been something that's part of our landscape for many years. So, for example, we were one of the first institutions in the country to host an exhibition on William H. Johnson, who is an African-American artist born in South Carolina. We did one of the first exhibitions on Edwin Charleston, before which, very few people even knew that artist in our community. So, keeping that track record of exhibitions and focusing on African-American artists or artists of color is extremely important to us, and we continue that. Where we need to put our emphasis on is in people, diversifying our board, diversifying our staff, diversifying the people who actually tell the story, because their perspective is needed, and we very much want to incorporate it into our conversation at the Gibbes.
Yes, ma'am. And let me ask you this too. What is the historical and current context with regards to other forms of oppression, class, gender, age, sexual orientation, disability, for the issue at the structural, institutional, and interpersonal levels?
Now, you might have to repeat that for me.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. In your mind, what is the historical and current context with regards to other forms of oppression, such as class, gender, age, sexual orientation, and disability, for the issue at the structural, institutional, and interpersonal levels?
Right. So historically, I mean, obviously, museums have always been viewed as elite organizations, and breaking down those barriers, making everyone feel welcome and feel as though they belong, is at the forefront of what we want to accomplish at the Gibbes. Since we reopened the building after the renovation in 2016, we've done a lot to sort of create that sense of people seeing themselves in the institution and wanting to come as a result of that.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. And let me ask you this. This might be another tough question here, but have race and other forms of oppression been used as political tools in decision making around this issue in your mind?
In the past,
Yes,
well, I mean, the Gibbes was a segregated institution until near the end of the 1960s, just like so many other older institutions like the museum. So, that was something that obviously had an impact on people's attitudes about the institution going forward and whether or not they felt comfortable here. So, resolving those and making it clear to our community is extremely important.
Yes, ma'am. And do you have a network of organizations and individuals strong enough to advance your equity goal?
We think so, but that too needs improvement because we need those voices on our committees, on our board, to help us see what we might be missing and what we may not be able to see just because of who we are.
And what financial resources are being devoted to achieving racial equity within the organization and within the communities that the organization serves?
Well, from an exhibition standpoint, we put resources. Our exhibition schedule is very much about creating diversity through the exhibitions. As far as our collection is concerned, our acquisitions endowment is very small regardless. We have never been an institution that has deep pockets in that area in order to create the kind of diversity that we would like to see. In the world of staff, this is something that's evolving, and we have made progress in this area. So, and we hope to continue that. But obviously with COVID, the kinds of cuts that we've had to make, the kinds of reductions in salaries and in personnel, that's going to be a road that we have to be very persistent about and not lose sight of.
Speaking of COVID, what would you say is your annual budget in the midst of COVID?
Well, before COVID began, our annual budget was almost $3 million. We were at 2.9 in the last fiscal year before COVID. With COVID, we had to cut $1 million out of our budget. And so now our budget stands at around 2 million.
Yes, ma'am. And when you look at the budget from July 2020 to right now, what still worries you the most, Angela?
I think, interestingly, when we reopened to the public in 2016, the concept was to create an institution that had a very diverse income stream. And we had accomplished that. I mean, we have our museum store, we have our art sales gallery, we have our rental program for the institution, as well as admissions, and then our whole development component for donations. Obviously, with COVID, what we lost is our earned income, which comprises for COVID, we lost about 42% of that. So I think the concerns that all nonprofit public entities like the Gibbes have now is when that income will return. What will the tourist industry look like in the future for Charleston?
Yes, ma'am. And what are the numbers for in-person tours versus virtual tours when you think of the Gibbes?
Well, right now, I mean, we do many tours for free. Obviously, if you'll remember, the first floor of the museum is completely free to the public so that people can walk in, enjoy our store, enjoy our garden, look at the artwork down the corridor, as well as our new art sales gallery. The admission to go into the museum upstairs is reasonable in terms of what other institutions are doing. Our top adult ticket is $12, and then it drops from there for discounts for the military, senior citizens, of course, less for students. For children at a certain age, it's free. And then the best deal in town, of course, is just to be a member.
Yes,
because then you get to come as often as you like.
That's right, exactly.
And enjoy as many virtual components as we have.
Yes, ma'am. And how much has your membership remained consistent in the midst of COVID?
Well, we've been very fortunate. Our membership has stayed strong. We were able to adapt fairly quickly to virtual programming so that we could keep people involved. As I said earlier, we opened on June 1 after being closed for 2.5 months back last spring. And slowly but surely, members as well as visitors are returning. We have now reached about between 40 and 50% visitation from our usual budget. So we find ourselves pretty fortunate on that front. And I think it's also because of the changing exhibitions that we've continued to be able to offer.
And so what's new and what's now at the Gibbes Museum of Art?
Well, you may know that we just closed the wonderful exhibition, the Vibrant Vision collection of Jonathan Green and Richard Widman. They were so gracious to loan their collection to us beginning last August, and it just closed a week ago Sunday. We are now opening 2 new shows beginning this Friday. One is an exhibition on Manning Williams, who is an artist from Charleston. A new book has been published on him through the Post and Courier, or the Evening Post rather. And so we're excited to present this retrospective, or these group of objects by him. And then we're also doing a major exhibition from our own collection, our wonderful, wonderful photography collection that was given to the Gibbes back in the 1960s and early 70s. The Robert Marks collection is truly a stellar group of works that provide insight into photography from the early part of the 20th century, when photography was becoming so exciting and such an interesting part of the art scene.
Here in the Low Country. Yes, ma'am. We appreciate that. And let me get back to obviously economics. What is the Gibbes annual total economic impact on the Low Country?
Well, we did an economic survey back in 2017, and at that time it was done by the business school at the Citadel. They were kind enough to take us on as a project, and so they did all the surveys and all the analysis. And our impact on the city of Charleston and the entire region is about $170 million when you break it all down, through the various artists that we employ, the various exhibitions that we do. The reach of the institution is pretty significant as far as the visual arts are concerned.
And what is the Gibbes Museum return on investment?
Oh, goodness. As far as I'm concerned, we're all about changing people's lives, helping them to see that art is a way to do that. My goal is always to create the next great artist from South Carolina. A good example probably is Mary Jackson.
Oh, yes.
She is a MacArthur Genius Award winner, and that's what I want to see.
Yes.
The next one, and the next one, and the next one.
Absolutely. And how does the Gibbes Museum make best of its value by displaying the best quality art that is transformative and sometimes intellectually complex?
Well, I mean, we're always pushing the envelope. We're always trying to help people see art in different ways. And probably a good example is what we're doing with the medical university, with MUSC.
Right.
We have been working in tandem with them to create programming and especially classes that provide medical students with the skills that artists and art historians have in the area of observation so that they can become better diagnosticians. Artists and art historians and people who are involved with the arts learn the skill of observation. That is part of the technique of understanding what works of art are all about. So being able to share that skill with medical students from all the colleges at MUSC is exciting to us and will help the medical world have better doctors.
Absolutely.
And nurses and therapists and physical therapists, you name it.
Absolutely. You're right about that. And how do you develop and promote an experience at the Gibbes with a creative process?
Well, after the renovation, we were able to restore, or during the renovation, we were able to restore the wonderful classrooms and studios that were built as part of the institution back in 1905 when the museum opened. So now we have a regular schedule of visiting artists that spend their time doing a residency at the Gibbes. Our visitors can go in and engage with the artists in their studio and actually learn how they create the work that they create. So this is becoming more and more a part of our daily activity, so that people understand works from the process all the way to the finished product.
And speaking of classrooms, how will the Gibbes Museum deliver an educational program that will incorporate art and insert interdisciplinary learning strategies?
So right now, because unfortunately we can't do field trips, nor are the schools in a position to do field trips, we're doing a lot more in terms of curriculum development, virtual education, and the curriculum development is specific to other disciplines besides art, whether it's English, history, mathematics. We are inserting the art into these conversations for teachers.
Yes, ma'am. And how then will you stay as the Gibbes Museum of Art in a continuous development mode?
Oh, well, I mean, that is the a labor of love, frankly, because it's important to me and to my staff that we're able to stay connected to our donors, to our members, to help them see how significant the arts are, can be in our community, and what a change it will make. I often ask people, what would Charleston be like if the Gibbes didn't exist? And I think that, ultimately, it's the realization that having a visual arts institution in your city makes it a great city.
Absolutely. And I know the Gibbes Museum enhances lives through art by engaging people of every background and experience with art and artists of enduring quality by collecting and preserving art that touches Charleston, and to provide opportunities to learn, discover, to enjoy, and be inspired by the creative processes I just mentioned. How will the Gibbes Museum of Art enhance lives 5-10 years from now?
Well, I think that by continuing to present provocative exhibitions, stretching people's minds, stretching people's experiences so that there is a real sense of growth and understanding and dialogue. I mean, art creates dialogue. People are able, as I said earlier, it's a wonderful equalizer in terms of everybody can have an opinion, and there's no wrong opinion.
That is amazing. That's really amazing. Well, the Honorable Angela Mack, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure to see you, and I love your background.
Oh, thank you. Only if it wasn't warmer out here.
I bet. You make it seem like it is.
Oh, thank God.